Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Welcome to MIHR's first annual webcast on hiring requirements for the Ontario and Quebec region's mining industries. So in this session, we'll begin with a brief introduction of MIHR, who we are and what we do, followed by an overview of the Canadian mining labor market and MIHR's national hiring requirements forecast. We'll also then turn our attention to the needs in the Ontario and Quebec regions and discuss the region's unique context. And it'll be no surprise to those of you tuning in from Ontario and Quebec that the mining industry in this region is a mature industry with some exciting new advanced development and exploration projects going on. It's an aging workforce, and there are concerns about pending retirement. So we'll get into discussions about all of those things and a few others when we get to the section on the region itself. So to start with, a little bit about who we are and what we do. The Mining Industry Human Resources Council is the national HR council for the minerals and metals industry. It's an industry-driven organization that conducts research and collaborates with a wide spectrum of stakeholders to provide targeted programs and initiatives for solutions for the skilled labor shortage that's coming. We have a wide spectrum of stakeholders and hundreds of industry volunteers and leaders help lead and develop our project committees and our program initiatives. Our core mandate is to identify the national HR challenges and opportunities for the minerals and metals industry and to create national solutions through this collaboration, partnerships and synergies that we are a catalyst for. Our stakeholders, our partners, and our collaborators include industry employers, both in mineral exploration, in extraction, and in aggregate producer sectors. We have national and provincial mining associations and exploration associations that collaborate with us, national organized labor groups, federal, provincial, and territorial governments and government representatives, and post-secondary education and technical institutions involved in our steering committees and programs. In addition, we also partner and collaborate with various groups of interest in the industry. For example, Aboriginal interest groups, women and youth groups as well. MIHR's strategic plan is divided into three key priority areas: attraction, retention and transition, skills learning and mobility, and research for industry sustainability. Under our attraction, retention, and transition, or ART programming banner, we provide tools and programs that increase workplace diversity aimed at Aboriginal participation and inclusion in the workplace, helping employers retain key talent, and aggressively promoting careers in mining through our Explore for More initiatives. Under our Skills Learning and Mobility banner, our objective is to identify and support the development of tools and systems that are required to ensure appropriately skilled, effective, and mobile workforce. We have industry-led worker certification program that's based on industry-established national occupational standards. And just this past May, that program certified the first ever Canadian surface miner, underground miners, and mineral process operators in the sector. We are currently piloting certification of diamond drillers and drill helpers, and are in the pilot phases of developing training accreditation standards. Under our Research for Industry Sustainability banner is what brings us together today, and where we house our research and our initiatives for our labor market information. It has the initiatives that we call the Mining Industry Workforce Information Network, which houses most of our research on LMI, and also our research on HR issues and HR challenges facing the sector. In addition to this, we've begun research work in strategic workforce planning and strategic HR management. You can hit up MIHR's website for more information about who we are and what we do and what our programs are and various initiatives that I didn't get into all of the menu of options that you have from us today. So you can visit www.mihr.ca to find out more if some of those areas sounded like something that you might be interested in knowing more about. Each year, under our Research for Industry Sustainability banner, MIHR produces a labor market forecast for the Canadian mining industry and provides you with an overview of the Canadian mining labor market. So in this section of the webinar, I'll be providing you with a summary of our current national mining labor market reports. Canada's mining industry is a global leader. We have a diverse commodity basket available in this country and the value of mineral production that is amongst the highest in the world. Mining accounts for roughly 3.5% of the nation's real GDP, and demand for our commodities continues to stay high in developing countries. So the industry will face pressures in the future as it strives to meet this demand. Along with capital allocation and cost management, human resources challenges are surfacing as among the largest issues that are facing our sector. The recent global recession, 2008-2009, led to a drop in demand and prices for commodities worldwide that did impact the Canadian mining industry. This drop in demand for commodities led to operations slowing or suspending activities at over 30 mine sites across the country, which then led to a reduced overall employment in the sector. However, economic growth has resumed and employment levels are rising, and we have seen and will continue over the next year or so to see a recovery in terms of employment in the sector, and you'll see that illustrated throughout the charts that I'll show you later in the webinar, showing you the year-on-year impacts of employment on the sector. We do caution that economic uncertainty around the world does continue, and we caution that you take a conservative approach in forecasting your needs moving forward. We will provide you with different scenarios, a conservative scenario, a baseline scenario, or a contractionary scenario, baseline scenario, and an expansionary scenario, but do caution a conservative approach moving forward. MIHR's research has shown a strong relationship between commodity prices and employment in the mining sector. So what we're showing you here is a graph, the blue line on your screen right now, a graph of employment in mining in Canada over the past 5 years or so. And now layering in for you in orange is a depiction of what the minerals price index has done over the same period of time. And you'll notice a strong positive correlation with mining employment and the minerals price index here. It's a bit of a lagged effect, so as mineral prices start to decline, employers are quick to respond with adjustments in the workforce, and then maybe just a touch slower to recover when prices start recovering. In addition to this relationship with commodity prices, MIHR research also shows a relationship with productivity in the sector. So it's not this positive correlation that you're seeing here with the mineral price index, but what we call an inverse relationship. So as productivity increases, we tend to see employment starting to shrink, and this may be due to factors such as improvements in technology and equipment, making production easier with fewer people. So when we're forecasting employment in our forecast, we do keep in mind this strong relationship between commodity prices and productivity in the sector. But in addition, is also layered onto this relationship are trends within the Canadian labour market in general. The Canadian labour force is aging. This is something that we've been talking about for a number of years now, and will not be a surprise to anybody listening today. As the baby boom generation reaches retirement age over the next decade, the Canadian labour market will reach a point where there are more people eligible to leave the labour force than to enter it. This is causing what we call a retirement bubble that's coming. In mining, the labour force is even older than we see in the rest of the Canadian labour force, and retirement ages are also younger in mining, which creates what we call a perfect storm of retirement exits coming. So not only do we have an older labour force, but we also have a labour force that's going to retire slightly younger than we see in the rest of the Canadian labour market. For this reason, we've done a lot of research and programming work here at MIHR that's aimed at increasing attraction and retention of key talent groups in the sector. We're focused on including young people, women, new Canadians, and Aboriginal people, as well as efforts around technology improvements and increasing productivity. And a combination of all of these approaches will be crucial as we move forward as an industry to retain our strong position in the global economy. Each year at the end of the summer, MIHR produces a 10-year employment and hiring requirements outlook for the sector. Our first annual report was released in 2010 and was followed this year by our second annual report in 2011. The 2010 report contains a detailed discussion of our modeling and what we consider in our hiring requirements forecast. The 2011 edition of the report incorporates small adjustments to our forecasts and updates to account for current economic and demographic issues that are constantly changing. Key sections of the report that may interest you are the beginning parts where we introduce what we're forecasting and some of the changes that we've seen over the past year, and give you a brief economic overview of the sector. We then take a look in the reports at key mining labor market trends and proceed with forecasts of national hiring requirements. We then break these hiring requirements down across 6 different regions and provide a discussion of the trends and issues that are facing the Canadian mining labor market moving forward. Our hiring requirements forecasts are based on an economic model that combines a number of factors, including, as I was saying earlier, commodity prices, labor productivity, retirement rates and age demographics of the mining workforce, and non-retirement separation rates. Non-retirement separation rates are baseline industry churn rates that we established that include all kinds of exits from the industry that are not related to retirement. So it would include leaving the industry to go work in another industry, personal leaves, and returning for education, or any other reason that somebody might leave the sector that's not related to retirement. So using a combination of independent economic forecasts and information from stakeholders and MIHR surveys, some of you may have filled these out in the past. Each year we send out a survey to mining industry employers asking them about their demographic profile of their workforce and how many they employ and what occupations. We take this information in combination with economic forecasts and data from Statistics Canada and other government groups, and roll them all together to produce forecasts for the sector on future hiring requirements. Our forecasts include 3 different scenarios for forecasting. A contractionary scenario, which assumes a bleak look on economic conditions looking forward. A baseline scenario, which assumes a base case or a current status quo outlook on future conditions. And an expansionary scenario that assumes a best case scenario in economic conditions looking forward. So for those of you who like graphic depictions of methodology, what we have for you here is step-by-step overview of our approach to our forecasting here at MIHR. What you see here in orange are the various inputs to our forecasts, and in blue various output points. So again, we start with a rigorous data collection stage. We then move into a modeling and development stage of forecasting, where we run a number of iterations of the model and then land on the one that best explains variations in employment in mining. We then take those employment forecasts and produce forecasts of employment looking out over a 10-year horizon for 6 different regions by 3 different scenarios. We also collect our own internal research and do some validation work in the sector of the forecasts that we produce of employment. We also model replacement requirements in the sector in terms of non-retirement separation rates, and assume a baseline state for non-retirement separation rates for the sector, and retirement separations. And for that, we look at age demographic profile of the sector and calculate retirement rates for the 10-year horizon. We roll this all together into a hiring requirements forecast that we present to you by region and by scenario, and then go ahead and break that down into 66 different occupations for each region, and give you an outlook for each of the 66 occupations that we follow as being the core critical occupations for the mining sector. All of that rolls together to produce our national hiring requirements forecasts. We present them to you so that you can see what the impacts of changes in employment versus replacement requirements, and then cumulative hiring requirements forecast as the end result. So under a baseline scenario, over the next 10 years, you'll see that's the orange middle line in your table in front of you that just expanded for you. We're showing a slight contraction in terms of change of employment in the sector of about 1,000. And however, in terms of cumulative hiring requirements, we are forecasting a need to hire over 112,000 people in the next 10 years. This is being mainly driven, as you can see in the middle of your table, by replacement requirements. In terms of retirement, we're looking to hire or replace over 67,000 workers over the next 10 years, and over 45, close to 46,000 due to non-retirement separations. So you can see that the need for hiring in the industry over the next 10 years is being driven by replacement requirements in the sector. We also present to you contractionary and expansionary scenarios, and as you can see here, under contractionary scenario, and that's assuming worst case scenario in terms of the economics of the sector, and a change in employment or a reduction in employment in the sector of over 28,000 workers, we would still need to hire over 75,000 workers over the next 10 years just to replace those leaving due to retirement and non-retirement separations. And in the expansionary scenario, assuming best case scenario for economic conditions moving forward and several promising deposits and advanced development projects coming online, We're looking at a change in employment of over 20,000 workers and an end state hiring requirements, including replacement requirements, of over 141,000 workers over the next 10 years. For those of you who like a year-by-year breakdown rather than a broad 10-year outlook, we do provide that for you. What we're showing here, I'm going to layer in the 3 different components that we just talked about. So change in employment, non-retirement separation, and then retirements from the sector. So you can see the impact of each moving forward. So as you can see here, in the short term, the next 2 or 3 years, there is a bit of a positive change in employment, and that is reflecting, as I was saying earlier, this recovery from our recent economic downturn. Over the long term, however, we'll see a smoothing out of that and even a bit of a slight contraction out to 2021 in terms of changes in employment. However, when we layer in non-retirement separations, and this is assuming about a 2.5% churn in the sector, we'll need to replace anywhere from close to 15,000 to 5,000 workers over each year out to 2021. When we add in retirement separations from the sector, you can see here that on average we'll need to replace over 10,000 workers a year out to 2021, so over the next 10 years. So a little bit of an increased need over the next 2 or 3 years that's again due to economic recovery and new employment in the sector. So to summarize, for those of you who like the short, medium, and long-term outlook rather than a 10-year outlook or a year-by-year outlook, we also provide a picture of what things look like over the short, medium, and long term. So we pick a 2, 5, and 10-year outlook for you on that one. As you can see, again, over 112,000 workers out to 2021, with close to 42,000 being needed under a baseline scenario in the next 2 years, and close to 65,000 being needed in the medium term in the next 5 years. So that again is that middle baseline scenario that we're talking about. So we make a number of assumptions when we're producing our forecasts, and for those of you who like to play with these things or would like to set your own case scenarios for your own organization or your own regional situation, we make that possible on our labor market information portal, which you can find at www.mininghrforecast.ca. It's what we hope is a user-friendly interface where you can go in and change some of the assumptions and move things around a little bit to see what will happen for your organization or your local area. So in addition to our forecasting tool, also on this website, you can see that we keep copies of our resources or our various research reports and our labor market outlook reports. So it's a one-stop place for you to find all of the information that we have in our mining industry workforce information network. So when you land on this landing page, you can, in the bottom right-hand corner there, click on the launch button, and that will take you to our employment forecasting tool. Once you reach this page, you can choose to create forecasts based on the scenarios that MIHR has already established in all of our research, and select whether you want those for the entire country, so click on the Canada button, or whether you want a forecast for a specific region. The 6 regions that we break our forecast into are the Territories, British Columbia, the Prairies, Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada. So let's say for this forecast you're interested in the Prairie region or Ontario, Quebec. You would just click on the region that you're interested in. Then you can also select which of the 66 occupations you are interested in, or a broad occupational category, or all occupations that are significant to mining. Once you make your selections in this area, you then click on the right there on the button that says Create Forecast, and you're presented with MIHR's standard forecast for the selections that you made. In the top area, you see a chart that shows you what the assumptions were going into the standard forecast. So you see here our standard forecasts assume a retirement age of 59.5 years, which is the average retirement age over the entire over the Canadian mining industry for the past 20 years. Non-retirement separation rate of about 2.5%, and again, this is a historic rate that we've seen in the sector over the last several decades. And labor productivity index rates shown to you there. You are presented with contractionary, baseline, and expansionary scenarios in red, gray, and blue on your screen over a short, medium, and long-term outlook. If you are not a fan of bar graphs and prefer a line graph, you can click on the button right underneath the graph, and it'll translate this forecast graphic depiction of the forecast into a line graph for you. And for those of you who like charts and tables, on the bottom of the screen, we present the forecast to you in terms of raw numbers. You can then export these forecasts into Excel format if you prefer, and graph them however you like and present them in a way that makes sense for your needs. Now, if you're, as I said, not sure that you need MIHR's current assumptions as part of your forecasting, that you would like to see what would happen under a what-if scenario, we provide that option to you. So you can click on the what if scenario button, and you'll be provided with instructions on what to do with each of the 3 different areas of assumption. Set your own assumptions. So let's say you're interested in a different retirement age, and you very well might be in Ontario and Quebec. Something we're going to talk about in just a second is that the average age of retirement in this region is closer to 62 years and not what's seen across the country is the 59.5. You could click on that average age of retirement area and change those assumptions and produce your own employment forecasts under a what-if scenario. So when you do that, you'll see on the left displayed the MIHR standard assumptions and scenario, and then you can compare those to your what-if scenarios that you've created. You can download your what-if scenarios, and if you're really lost and not sure what to do with those what-if scenarios, you can call Ross or myself, and we'd be glad to walk you through some of the assumptions that are set there. So as you're thinking through your own needs and what's going on in the Ontario and Quebec region, we'll provide what you hear with a little bit of a broad overview of the context in the region and show you the regional breakdown for the mining industry in Ontario and in Quebec separately. You can also contact us at any time to ask questions if you're interested in what some of the different assumptions are in the region. I think I just said earlier that the Ontario and Quebec mining industry has a retirement age that's older than the average, and I actually meant to say the opposite, that it has a younger retirement age than we see in the rest of the Canadian mining industry. So for those of you who are a little bit confused earlier, I will correct that now. There is an aging workforce in Ontario and Quebec. It's an established industry, mature industry. Mines are well established and have a long life of mine in some cases. Mines are located in this region, you know, close to or near urban communities, which makes it a little bit different than what you'll see in other areas of the country, like the territories where they have predominantly a fly-in, fly-out workforce. However, there are several sites that are located in remote regions and northern regions, particularly in northern Ontario and northern Quebec and area. There is easy access, relatively easy access to mining-related education and training in Ontario and Quebec, with some major institutions, for example, Laurentian University, located within mining communities. And this changes the relationship between education and industry, and it's an important one in addressing some of the challenges in the labor market and labor shortages coming. There's little or no employment growth in the region currently, but definitely promising potential with some mineral reserves and promising advanced development projects in the area. And you'll see those reflected in our expansionary scenarios that I'm talking about moving forward here. So when we think about employment in mining, we talk about just over 210,000 workers from coast to coast, but this isn't broken down across regions equally. Obviously, each region of the country has different mining activities and different levels of employment. So you see in Ontario and Quebec that just over 40% of the Canadian mining labor force is located in these two regions, with the bulk of the rest of them located in the West. That said, not all, when we talk about raw numbers and the need to replace hundreds versus tens of thousands of workers, not all hires are created equal. So where they may only have 2% of the Canadian mining industry, or of the employed Canadian mining industry in the territories, finding 300 or 400 workers over the next 10 years is a significant challenge to them, as tens of thousands of workers would be in Ontario and Quebec region. When we look at employment over the next 2, 5, and 10 years in the sector, so these are not the hiring requirements, these are just the employment numbers that we're showing you here. There are two regions in the country that are showing employment growth, and that's the prairies and the territories. And the rest of the industry, we're showing average annual growth rates that are contracting just slightly over the next 10 years. So as you can see here in the second and third lines in this chart, we're showing slight contractions in employment in both Ontario and Quebec over the next 10 years that will culminate in about 35,000 in each province, reduction in employment. When we look at cumulative hiring requirements, this includes the replacement requirements, the retirements and the non-retirement separations, along with the activity and changes in employment. We again see that proportionate around the country, the needs are not all created equal. So in terms of cumulative hiring requirements, about 30%, or just a little over 30% of the needs are found in Ontario and Quebec region. So when we talk about needing to replace 112,000 workers, about just a little over 30% are required in Ontario and Quebec. Okay, so looking at Quebec in isolation of the rest of the country, again, we'll show you here in a baseline scenario, the line in the middle that's highlighted in orange. Over a short, medium, and long term, we're looking at between just a little over 11,000 workers within the next 2 years, just over 12,000 in the next 5 years, and almost 21,000 workers over the next 10 years. And again, here we have shown you a contractionary and an expansionary scenario for you to consider the outer limits of the baseline forecast. In Ontario, over the short, medium, and long term, again in the middle under a baseline scenario, we're looking at a need to hire between 3,000 and 16,000 workers in the short, medium, and long term. So for those of you who like the year-over-year, bit by bit, look at what the needs are. First showing you here for Quebec, change in employment with that early blip that we talked about in 2011 and 2012 that's showing some continued recovery from the economic downturn. And then leveling off and showing some contractions in employment in the medium term, and then leveling off over the long term, about a slight contraction out to 2021. Layering in non-retirement separations and then retirement separations, you can see over the long term a need to replace or a need to hire over 2,000 workers in Quebec year over year, and these are mainly driven by replacement requirements, so replacing non-retirement and retirement separations. For Ontario, a year-over-year scenario, again in a baseline scenario, not including advanced development and mineral reserve projects that are showing promise in the Ring of Fire area. We're showing a change in employment that contracts over the short and medium term and then levels itself out with a slight contraction of 5,000 over to 2021. So the hiring requirements in Ontario are driven solely by replacement requirements. So we layer in non-retirement separations and retirement separations, and you see a need to hire in Ontario 2,500 or nearly 2,500 workers year over year to 2021. And also quite evident in this graph is what happens when we add in that orange bit, that's the retirement separations. And this is reflective of the aging workforce and pending retirement separations in the Ontario region. So as I said earlier, another thing that we do with our forecasts is break them down into look at what's happening in each of the different occupations. In our full national report, you'll find in the appendices a look at each of the 66 occupations that MIHR follows as being the core occupations for the mining sector. What we're showing you here are the top 10 occupations for the Quebec region, and which regions are in your top 10 are somewhat reflective of the activities and just the sheer numbers that you need in the workforce for extraction activities. But again, in the forecast that we produce in the full report, you can see what some of the needs would be for some of maybe the mineral exploration activities that wouldn't show up just as the sheer numbers of what's needed. So in terms of numbers of folks needed by 2021, we're looking at a real need for laborers, underground production and development miners, millwrights, and mineral and metal processing operators. And again, reflective of the activities that happen in the Quebec region with mineral processing. For Ontario, when we do a breakdown across occupations, the top 10 occupations in terms of numbers out to 2021 include as with Quebec, with a slightly different needs, slightly different ordering of needs. Production clerks, underground production and development miners, laborers in minerals and metal processing, and heavy equipment operators and industrial mechanics. Again, reflective of the types of mining activities that you see in Ontario with mature mining operations and mineral processing operations in the region. So in summary, compared to other regions of the country, Quebec and Ontario have specific and unique context that then translates into unique challenges for the region. It's an aging labor force in Ontario, Quebec, and that labor force, mining labor force, retires quite a lot younger than you see in the rest of the Canadian labor market, and then you would see in other areas of the country. Many mine sites are established mining operations with mineral processing operations attached to them, and it's what we call mature industry in this region. Many mine sites are located near urban communities with easy access to applicable post-secondary education and training institutions, and easy access to site with less fly-in, fly-out activity than we see in other regions. There's little or no employment growth forecast in the area under a baseline scenario, but there are promising mineral deposits that signal future growth potential that's incorporated, again, into our expansionary case scenarios. So that concludes our snapshot of the hiring requirements in the Ontario and Quebec region and an overview of our national labor market forecast. What I'd like to do here is just take a brief moment to talk to you a little bit more about our mining industry workforce information network, or what we call MIWIN, and some of the research activities that go on in our Research for Industry Sustainability group. We do provide custom research for specific areas of the country and specific regions, and are in the middle of doing customized work for the Thunder Bay District in partnership and collaboration with the North Superior Workforce Planning Board. This is possible for other regions, and we do provincial level breakdowns. So for some of the regions in the country, given some data limitations for input data that we need for our forecasting, we had to lump groups together. So you'll notice that we talked about forecasts for Ontario and Quebec in isolation in our national forecast, but not for Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta. They get lumped together in their priority forecast. We do, in this customized work, go into a region or a province and do our own surveying and data collection in the region to get specific inputs and customized inputs to our forecasting model. We then go back to the assumptions in our model and tweak them for that region. So if that's something that would be interesting to you in your area, don't hesitate to give us a shout. We do have the capability to do that. You're not limited to the 6 regions and the breakdowns that we show you in the online tool and in our national forecast. In addition to this, our model is going continuous improvements and ongoing developments as part of our commitment to bring you the most up-to-date and specific, or as specific as we can get, outlooks. So something to keep an eye out for in our 2012 report are some improvements to, or some developments to our employment forecasting model, where we'll begin looking at better incorporating mineral exploration into the forecast than we currently have, and becoming commodity sensitive in our employment modeling. And the other thing that we're going to incorporate into our 2012 report is the look at available talent. So what we just had a conversation about here and what we've produced to date from MIHR are hiring requirements outlooks, which is telling you what you'll need, or who you'll need to hire, how many you'll need to hire. The other side of understanding what's going on in terms of the labor market for mining is understanding what talent will be available in each of the occupations to fill the hiring needs that we're talking about. We have done extensive work over the last year and a half to develop a model of available talent on an occupational level that will include a look at, that does include a look at school leavers, or folks who are leaving schools and entering the labor market, interprovincial mobility, so movement of talent across provincial borders, and international migration, so movement of talent around the globe, and folks who are re-entering the labor market after a prolonged period of exit. We roll all of those together to give you an occupation-by-occupation look at available talent, and then do a gap analysis against the hiring requirements for the different regions. So you'll see this in our upcoming national report in 2012. And for those of you who are interested in what this might look like, we piloted this just this past spring in Saskatchewan, and we do have a report available on our website that shows you what this gap analysis will look like and gives you a little more discussion on our available talent forecasts. So they are available for the province of Saskatchewan and will be rolled out for the rest of the nation for our 2012 report. So that brings us to the conclusion of our presentation today, and at this point I would like to open the floor to take your questions and answers. And again, Ross has been collecting these throughout the webinar this afternoon and will now present them.
Thanks, Martha. Excuse me. So the first question we have is regarding labor productivity. When you talk about labor productivity, what kind of components are you talking about that are included in that?
It's a measure of real GDP over hours worked, and it's a measure that comes from Statistics Canada, so it's an indexed measure that we get from them. It's actually the limiting factor in our forecast that forces us to group some of the provinces together. So when you see us grouping Prairie provinces and Atlantic provinces and the Northern Territories together, that would be the main driver for that. So if you're interested in more details about that, I'd certainly be happy to answer those over an email.
So you indicated that the baseline forecast does not include advanced development projects or the Ring of Fire. Depending on the timeline that comes in, would that be more applicable to the expansionary forecast or somewhere in between the baseline and the expansionary?
It would be most applicable in the expansionary scenario, and the other thing to caution you on there is that our capabilities in forecasting mineral exploration have been somewhat limited. We do include industry, so the way our forecasts are broken down is based on Statistics Canada's national occupational classification system for occupations, and also on North American industry classification for industries. So we take those codes and we divide them out to best capture the sector using occupation and industry classifications. To date, we have used a measure of mineral exploration in industry classification called support services for mining and oil and gas. But very recently, in fact, just this summer, we released a mineral exploration sector study, and one of the outcomes of that study showed us that we had some limitations in our ability to capture mineral exploration and mining. So that's the driver of the research work I was talking about that we are actually right now engaged in better incorporating mineral exploration. So yes, our expansionary scenario will give you probably our currently best estimate of what to look out for moving forward with the Ring of Fire region, but I would caution you to take a look at our 2012 report when we've better incorporated mineral exploration to get a better sense of what that will look like.
And the final question I have in the queue is regarding the Prairie provinces, and it's does the Prairie numbers include the mining that currently exists in the oil sands?
It's a very similar conversation to what we just had around mineral exploration. Yes, some of the mining activities in the oil sands are included in our forecast, just the way that our industry codes divvy themselves up. But again, no, it's not as good as it could be, and we're not capturing all of the activities in the oil sands region. We'll be presenting a regional webinar for the Prairie region actually this afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern. So if any of you are interested in hearing more about that, please feel free to register for that webinar. It's certainly not too late for that. And I will address some of those in that webinar. But for here, I'll just preview that we do recognize that we haven't quite captured oil sands activities as well as we could, and have proposed various projects for taking a good close look at mining activities in the oil sands, and you can look for that in the next couple of years in our research activities. So those are all the questions that we had from the floor at the moment. Again, we would be happy to answer any questions that come up as you reflect on the webinar today. And if you have more that you would like to send to us, please feel free to do that. You can reach me anytime at mroberts@mir.ca, or if you are forget my name or unsure of whether it was Martha Roberts or M. Roberts, you can always reach me also at research@mir.ca, which may be a little bit easier for you to remember. And if you're looking for playing around with our online tool, again, that can be found at www.mininghrforecast.ca. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today on our first annual Ontario and Quebec webinar on our hiring requirements forecast. We look forward to you joining us next year for a look at our 2012 hiring requirements and available talent forecast when we do the webinar again late next fall. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.